Welcome to class. Today we're going to talk about theories. So what do theories do for a scientist? In the simplest terms, theories are simplifying reality. Scientists recognize that reality is extremely complex, but what we need to do is organize our thinking and boil things down to what's the most important. If you talk to an alcoholic and you ask them to tell you their story about their alcoholism, they will tell you a story with just a lot of details about their lives and everything they did, and this happened and that happened. And the social scientists, we listen to all that, but in the end, we want to create a theory that simplifies reality and organizes our thinking and says, you know what? We've talked to 100 alcoholics, and there's a lot of details in there, but here's the big picture. These 3 or 4 factors are extremely important. Here's how they're connected. Here's a model, and it's a theoretical model about what causes people to become alcoholics. And that's why we create theories. I always tell students, we can drive around from one place to another and find our way there. But maps are really useful because they organize our thinking, they simplify reality, and we get there. Today, our maps will tell us whether there's traffic. It'll help us find a Chipotle or a McDonald's on the route. But in the old days, we used paper maps. And paper maps really simplified reality. Literally, all they had were the very large, important roads. And you got from point A to point B, and you just simplified everything. Theory works the same way. So, what are the parts of a theory? Okay, here we go. What are the parts of a theory? Theory. If we change X, it affects Y. This is called the causal relations, and this is all observable. Okay? These are always things we can observe. We can empirically ask questions. Who is doing something? When are they doing it? Where are they doing it? How often? If you remember our previous lecture, those are all empirical questions where we report the facts. What gets interesting for social science is when we move to causal mechanisms, which is the other part of theory. These are invisible forces. We think we can see causal mechanisms, but we cannot. We can see the implications of causal mechanisms, but we cannot see causal mechanisms directly. We infer. We create theoretical questions, and we infer causality. And you can never really be sure when you're inferring. You can be more or less sure, but it's not something you can ever be certain of, like a fact. So let me give you some examples. A causal mechanism is something like love, loyalty, honor, respect, friendship. We think we can see these things, but we cannot. We can see the observable outcome of a mechanism, and we think it's that. Let me give you an example. We have a young man, for example, who says to a woman, "I love you." He buys her flowers, takes her out to dinner, and, treats her very well. And we think, well, I observe all these things. The outcome is that they're dating. They have a title. They're boyfriend and girlfriend. It's all observable outcomes, observable causes. We can see all these things. And we infer that all of this is happening because of love. Well, you can't really see love. You can see what you think is love. Somebody kissing you, hugging you, treating you right. Is it possible that the person was doing it for other reasons? Maybe there was another mechanism. We misinferred. We thought it was one causal mechanism, but in fact, it was a different causal mechanism, and we're going to figure that out eventually based on more observation. That is possible. So the idea with mechanisms is that we observe this, we observe that, we see X comes first, Y comes second. We infer that the causal mechanism is anger or sadness or love or loyalty, but we could be wrong, and we have no way of knowing what's really causing it. Is the parent angry? Is the parent disappointed? Is the parent frustrated? We're not really sure. These are called the parts of a theory. The causal relations are observable. The causal mechanisms are not. Here are some examples from physics that you might be familiar with. Magnetism. We can see the implications of magnetism. You hold two magnets, one starts pulling the other one, eventually they pull together, and we say, what was the force that caused the two objects to come together? Magnetism. Physicists have named that invisible force magnetism. Same thing with gravity. We think we can see gravity. We cannot. We can see the empirical implications of gravity. I throw something up, and then it falls down. When I throw it up, that's my causal relation, the cause, and the thing coming down is something I can observe. We name the mechanism that draws it back down to the earth gravity. Same thing with electricity. These are some causal mechanisms from physics. Sociology, we have our own mechanisms that we investigate. There are three families of mechanisms. There are situational mechanisms. Situational mechanisms explain how a context causes an internal state, how context causes motivation. In our individualistic society, we tend to think that our internal states are sort of inside, they come from within. Sociologists generally disagree. We disagree. You go to a place like Disney World, that's a context. All of Disney World has been set up to make you feel happiness and excitement and have fun, and then you feel happiness, excitement, and fun. Could somebody go to Disneyland and have their mind set on having a bad time and totally be impervious to the context? Yes, they can. I'm not going to deny that. But the ways that context cause internal states, we call that the situational mechanism. Another great example of situational mechanisms is the television show Walking Dead. Everyone's living according to their normal lives. Suddenly, zombies start coming out of nowhere. There's no electricity, there's no food, there's no police, there's no safety, there's zombies walking the roads, and people start to act differently. And one of the main ideas of this entire course is that context shapes motivation. You want to change somebody's motive, change their context. Change the world, and you'll change, how they feel inside their body. Behavioral mechanisms are the second family of mechanisms. These mechanisms explain how certain motives are connected to certain actions. For example, maybe when you're angry, you punch a wall or you punch a person. That's a mechanism connecting an internal state, anger, and a behavior, violence. And we can explain how that connection develops. That internal state and that action come together over and over. Different people have different behavioral mechanisms. The last one's slightly hard to understand. It's called the transformational mechanism. What we're looking at here is that when something happens, each one of us have our own internal state, our own behaviors, our own actions, but as many people start to do something, everybody's actions combine, and it can produce a problem, a mechanism there too. The classic example is if there's a fire in a movie theater. Somebody yells fire, people start running out and pushing each other down and pushing each other, and people get trampled, and somebody dies. Again, the transformational mechanism is how everyone comes together and a bad thing actually happens. This is called Coleman's model. Coleman's model examines how social systems or context shape individual motives. Individual motives are shaped into individuals' action, and as many individuals take action, it transforms into a collective outcome. So let's start at the beginning, the social system and the context. We're at a movie theater. Somebody yells fire. The situational mechanism is sort of like in that context. It's dark, you smell smoke, you see the flames, somebody yells fire. How do you feel internally? How does that situation make you feel? Some people are going to panic. Some people are going to go into shock. Some people are going to sort of go into a caring mode, look for their children, ask everyone if they're okay. They're going to go into different modes. And this is going to lead to different behavior. When some people go into shock, they don't move. When other people go into panic, they'll push people down. When some people go into sort of a more heroic, a caring internal state, they might sort of gather people around them and say, "Are you okay? Hold hands. Let's follow each other out." And the transformational mechanism is the collective outcome, where most people get out, but maybe somebody gets left behind or trampled. Each week in our class, we're going to look at different contextual causes, parts of social systems. We're going to look at culture, structure, authority, physical space, groups. And we're going to focus on particular motives each week. Each family, there's a family of motives. There's the family of emotions, the family of habit, the family of self-interest, and the family of values. So each one of these is a very large category. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of values. There's a little bit less when it comes to habit and self-interest. And then, obviously, we're going to go over to behavior and collective outcomes. This is from an author named Cousal and Hector. Theories tell us how higher order phenomena affect individual units, why individual units act in particular ways, and how individual actions combine to produce new, higher order outcomes. This is a rational choice explanation of what theory is and why theory is useful. Theories tell us that when the economy goes bad, it's going to tell us how individual people act and how individual people combine to form new collective outcomes. So if there's a run on the bank because, you get a phone call saying, "Hey, all the money's gone in the bank, your home's being foreclosed on," how are individuals going to act, and how do those individuals combine into a new outcome? So we're going to come back to Coleman's model every single class. We're going to look at this idea of how culture shapes emotions and emotions shape behavior. We're going to look at how structure shapes values and values shape behavior. We're going to look at how authority shapes habit and habit shapes behavior. And I just want you to sort of think about this model. When you think about the social world, think about how context impacts internal state and how internal state impacts behavior and how behaviors aggregate or transform into a collective outcome. Thank you for listening. Go take your quiz.